You don't see, Tommy's not here yet, am I right? Sahar?
I don't see her
Okay.
yet. But I think she should be joining us. Maybe we can send her a message. Will, would you like to send her a message?
I'm not sure Will is on. I think he's getting things set up.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. In the meantime, we just want to welcome everyone for being here, for joining us today for our Environment Committee meeting. We have a very special presenter who's going to be joining soon. But this is a new committee, and it has been formed around climate change, which is such an important topic. We have all been impacted by it. Not many years ago, when Sandy, when Sandy happened, and how our own area was flooded, along with all of, obviously, the rest of the New York City as well. And what our presenter, and we're just waiting for her, she should be joining us shortly. What she would be presenting would be so relevant about how, what steps can be taken, what steps are in the pipeline. Before we go any further, I just wanted to give that a little bit of a heads up. We are waiting for her, so as soon as she is on, then we will formally start our meeting. So once again, thank you guys for joining, and for your patience as well. We also, Barbara and I, we both want to mention that if you have any questions that you would like to ask our special presenter, please, you would have an opportunity to do so at the end. So we would really encourage you to please do participate and have your questions and queries that you might have related to this topic answered. So, yeah.
Will, did you sent a notice? I haven't heard.
Yeah, I sent her a message.
Okay. Be a little patient. We confirmed with her, so we think.
We also hope that you were able to attend our previous meetings. The recordings of all of those meetings that we've had, again, related to the same topic in various different ways that we're trying to kind of, I would say, kind of tackle this particular topic of, climate change, environment. So we have had a few past meetings, and the recordings are all on our website. So if you would like to, kind of hear them as well, what was discussed, then you can visit the website. Will, would you mind just mentioning the website?
Yeah, our website is CB8M.com, and you just go to the committees section and click on
Environment.
Go to the committees section.
Thank you.
Click on environment.
This. Yeah, thank you for showing this. I
was going to say, if I may add to what Sahar said, we've examined this topic from in many different ways, but the last few meetings we've tried to talk about some of the legislation or pending legislation on both a federal. We had representatives from our new Congressman Jerry Nadler's office, and on a state and a city level. And I know the borough president has talked so much about some of the initiatives he's doing. And Tommy is not only his chief of staff, no, not the chief, Will, what is the title? The top attorney.
Consul General. She's a consul general.
Yes, but also the expert on environment in his office. So.
Yeah, we have a very special guest today. And So what we exactly, this is a great opportunity that we're actually getting, Barbara and I getting right now, to kind of tell you how we're looking at all of these meetings. What we're thinking of is how at the, at the federal level, how this particular topic is being handled, what legislation there has been, what's been passed on the state level. And now we're like kind of bringing it down to the, to the borough level. We would also be having a guest soon from the city, from New York City office as well, from the mayor's office too. So what we're trying to do is kind of provide you information about the different laws, legislation that have been passed, what exact work, and there has been, and it's very interesting that this is the right time because there is a lot of work that is being done around climate change. So what we're trying to do is kind of bring all of that information to you at each level, whether it is state, federal level, and then to the borough level. So what our guest today is going to describe or explain is what's happening around us. And so it's very relevant to our own lives and how it will impact us.
Tommy is here.
Tommy's sort of here. She hasn't joined with her audio yet. So
okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and give everybody some instructions on how our Zoom meetings work while she gets her audio connected. And then I think you'll be able to get going by the time I'm done with that.
Okay, thanks.
That sounds good for everybody. All right, so welcome. As the co-chairs have said, this is the April Environment Committee meeting. This is our first time joining us for one of our virtual committee meetings. You'll notice that you're muted right now. And the only people who will be unmuted at any given time are our co-chairs, Sahar and Barbara, and our presenter, Tommy, whenever she finishes joining. Following the presentation, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak and ask questions or make comments. If you want to participate, all you need to do is go to the reactions icon on your screen and press the raise hand button. It's not the wave button or the thumbs up button. Those will disappear. Only press the raise hand button once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software. It is not to ask questions or make comments to the co-chairs or presenter. They will never see those chats. Finally, if you're using an older version of Zoom, you may need to go to the participants section on your screen where you will find the raise hand feature there. And last, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen, as we may miss that and miss your opportunity. So if you're having any problems, chat me. I'm here for support. And with that, I do see that our guest is signed on fully and we can get going.
You'll unmute her. Thank you so much, Will.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm going to now start formally our meeting. Barbara and we both are the co-chairs of the Environment Committee at Community Board 8, and we want to warmly welcome you for joining us today and to hear what our very, very special presenter, speaker, Tommy West, what she has to share with all of us about all the different legislation and all the work that is coming from her office, from Manhattan Borough President's office, Mark Levine's office. Tommy West is our Consul General at Borough President Mark Levine's office, and she's the environment expert. So with that, I will pass it on to you, Tommy, to take it from here. And thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thanks for having me. So I have a guest who's going on to the presentation. Apologies. Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. In addition to being the general counsel for the Borough President, Mark Levine, I am also a resident of CB8. So very happy to be here and be with those of my neighbors here. Yeah, so I am going to go ahead and share my screen just give me 1 second. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So as a way of introduction, I do want to give a little bit of background about myself. Before I started at the Borough President's Office, I was also the General Counsel.
Tommy, we see a black screen, is that right? With just a
Oh, a
little
black
there
screen?
is.
It should
That's
be
it.
the.
Thank you, perfect.
Okay, you can see it, great.
Yeah.
I was also the General Counsel for the Mayor's Office for Climate and Environmental Justice and the iterations of that. The previous iterations of that going back to around 2016. So many years I've been living in the city's kind of climate space. And when the borough president brought me on, I was really happy because Mark's policies have really strongly aligned with a push towards, strong environmental and climate forward approach. Sorry about this, the background distraction. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute just to talk a little bit about the New York City's kind of unique climate vulnerabilities. I don't think this is going to be news to anyone in this group. I know all of you have been are supportive of the environment and probably aware of this, but so I won't linger too long on the first couple of slides, but this is a very, climate change is very important. So the climate vulnerabilities that New York City has are kind of threefold or fall into three different buckets. The first is heat, which is the leading of weather-related death nationally and in New York City. Approximately 350 New Yorkers die of heat-related causes every single year. And this, the vulnerability from heat is includes both the frequency and severity of heat waves. The next vulnerability that New York City faces is extreme storms. Hurricanes Henri and then especially Ida shortly thereafter demonstrated the city's vulnerability to extreme rainfall events. And Hurricane Sandy, of course, demonstrated the vulnerability to coastal storm surge. So again, with climate change, we're seeing more frequent and more extreme storms. And then the final kind of climate hazard is chronic flooding. With 520 miles of coastline, the city is, incredibly vulnerable to sea level rise. And with that comes regular tidal inundation. And there are some parts of the city that are experiencing that, even today. Climate change is an equity issue. It's one of the borough president's top priorities because it does not impact all New Yorkers equally. Oftentimes, those who are most impacted by the effects of climate change are those who are most vulnerable in our communities. So let's take the heat, for example. That really poses the biggest threat to the elderly and low-income New Yorkers and families who can't afford air conditioners or who can't afford the electricity bills associated with running an AC in the summertime. So this really is, a big equity issue that we need to address. And climate change is already impacting city services. This is not a problem for future generations to deal with. The city's feeling these impacts today, and moreover, it's not just people on an individual level on a day-to-day, it's city services as well. You can see from the images here, when the streets flood, the sanitation trucks can't get through. All modes of public transportation are impacted by flooding, and those city buildings that residents live in or frequent are also having to provide additional ACs and be cognizant of cooling for communities. So what are we doing to try and address some of these issues? The first and probably most visible of the borough president's climate programs is the Million More Trees initiative. And again, I think this is not news to anybody here in this group, given Community Board 8 passed a resolution in support of the borough president's Million More Trees initiative. So I don't think I need to go too much into the details about how important trees are, but I have some points listed here. And I also want to announce, in case this is new news, but the Borough Board also passed the similar resolution in support of million more trees at our meeting, April meeting last week. So that's really exciting for us. And in celebration of Arbor Day, the borough president is going to be launching a tremendous competition to find the best tree in Manhattan. So I encourage everyone here to submit to us their favorite tree in the city. I have a couple that I particularly like in Carl Schurz Park. So I don't know if you guys have your favorites, but I recommend you submit them to us, and they can appear on a Link NYC ad. And we're also going to be awarding the winning tree a proclamation. So this is all, again, in celebration of Arbor Day and the passing of these resolutions and kind of drawing attention to million more trees. And kind of a little bit later in May, we're also going to be drawing attention to the parks budget and thinking and calling on the Parks Department and the city to, figure out a concrete way to reach a million more trees initiative, or to reach a million more trees. The recently released sustainability plan that the city put out does have a 30% tree canopy goal, which is, great, fantastic. We think committing to a million more trees will also get you closer to that 30% canopy goal. And we're also going to be pushing the administration to kind of put a timeline on that. They said they want to achieve 30%, but didn't really give themselves a timeline by which to do so. So we're going to be pushing that. We think that funding parks at 1% of the budget will also help get us to that million more trees. An interesting fact about NYCHA is that they provide a substantial amount of green space in many communities where their campuses are. And, with their own tree canopies, we want to make sure that NYCHA gets the funding it needs to maintain its existing trees. And then thinking about kind of federal, state, and private funding options available to get the city where we need to be on that point. So million more trees. Next up, we have a climate ready and well-managed waterfront. This is a fairly big problem in the city. The city is implementing a number of coastal protection projects in Manhattan, kind of throughout the city, but also in particular in Manhattan. And as you can see from this kind of map here, there's an infinite number, almost an infinite number of agencies, federal, state, and city that are involved in these projects. And that has really kind of dispersed the accountability, in our opinion, because no one agency is responsible for protecting communities and protecting people from coastal storms or sea level rise. This leads to the delays of the current projects. It leads to kind of a resistance by agencies to want to take on new projects because it doesn't fit within their core mission. And then something that I think is particularly may be particularly poignant for this group here is, a neglect of traditional waterfront assets. So, you have the Parks Department, for example, which I think has a hard time maintaining some of its marine infrastructure because they don't have the in-house expertise. And it falls a little bit outside of their core mission. So the borough president's proposal to address this is to establish a new waterfront agency. And our proposal would be that this agency would have jurisdiction over the city's waterfront assets. It would be responsible for maintaining marine structures. And we think that this would increase accountability to the public, especially from a funding perspective. The second piece of the proposal is a little wonky, but we also think it's important to move waterfront permitting to DOB. This currently resides at SBS, but they don't even have a waterfront code by which they base the permits on. So our proposal would be that DOB take over that permitting, which already has the infrastructure in place to issue permits, and then to have DOB draft and develop a waterfront specific code. So that's a kind of on the resiliency front. The other thing that the borough president is really in support of is micro mobility. He's a huge supporter, firmly believes that we should be reimagining our existing streetscapes to accommodate multiple modes of transportation. And then this 9A bike lane proposal fits within that scheme. So the West Side Highway is really overcrowded and dangerous. I know this is kind of the other side of Manhattan, so maybe you haven't seen it as much, but it's one of the most heavily used bike paths in the entire country, and it creates an unsafe situation for people who are trying to walk along the path, and they're sharing it with not just bicycles but e-bikes and all kinds of other modes of transportation. So the borough president's proposal would be to take away a lane of the West Side Highway and dedicate that to just straight bike lane, so no pedestrian access, and that would from 57th Street all the way down to Chambers Street. We think that this would reduce carbon emissions, ease congestion on the existing greenway, minimize conflict and collision between pedestrians, and then also provide a legal path for e-bikes and delivery workers. Kind of on this streetscape idea, the borough president has also issued a blueprint for tackling the e-commerce and delivery crisis that we issued that in September. Since the pandemic, there's been an explosion of packages and e-commerce in the city. You can see the stat here, 2.4 million packages are transported and delivered to the city every day. The vast majority of those, or the highest concentration, is definitely in Manhattan. These last mile deliveries contribute to congestion, road safety issues, air pollution in the form of carbon emission, greenhouse gas emissions, and also package waste. So the borough president's proposal that's outlined in the blueprint includes repurposing parking garages for e-commerce fulfillment centers, utilizing our waterways better to allow for cargo delivery and staging. He also proposes that we make loading zones ubiquitous in all residential neighborhoods in Manhattan. He's also suggesting that we grow the network of access point locations for mom and pop shops, and also launch a common carrier parcel locker pilot program. He also really thinks it's important that we make e-commerce delivery more sustainable. And we can do that by piloting green loading zones in parts of Manhattan, specifically and particularly Midtown and Lower Manhattan. He also thinks that we should amend legislation to allow e-cargo bikes to be 48 inches in width, and suggests that we build more public charging infrastructure for e-bikes. And then finally, we need, in order to address this e-commerce issue, the city needs to do a better job of enforcing its traffic laws. That means, increasing enforcement of illegal parking violations in loading zones, updating this stipulated fine program or fee schedule for the fines. Right now, people think that it's okay they just consider it a cost of doing business to pay the fines. But if you up that, then the calculation becomes a little bit different. And then expanding the use of automated enforcement technology. So having cameras around to take pictures of those who are, double, triple parked and blocking our streets. So that's the e-commerce part. There's a few other initiatives that the office is supportive of, and we have kind of smaller programming around, but fully support. Composting is one of them. The borough president is pushing the administration to roll out curbside composting to Manhattan sooner than it's currently anticipated 2024 timeframe. Also expanding and considering the smart bins and where those are being placed in the interim. We are also a big supporter of circularity, and the borough president implemented the first Circularity Day along with Barnard convened it, and the first one in 2023 is last month. I don't know if I don't want to speak too much in jargon, but circularity is an age-old concept. You design products with their end life in mind so that they can be used, reused, repaired, and repurposed. And this is a day designed to raise awareness of the role that circularity plays in our economy and help identify strategies and policies to encourage it. Another initiative is Local Law 97 implementation. The borough president voted for Local Law 97 when he was a council member, and he's pushing the administration to, number one, offer carrots in the form of technical support, like those offered by the New York City Accelerator, and also think through, financial think through additional financial incentives that buildings could take advantage of to make the upgrades needed. But then, the other side is he wants the administration to keep the stick, right? If you don't fully enforce this law, then it's going to be, it's not going to have the impact that it needs to have. And then finally, the borough president's office has been a convener of the FIDI Seaport Climate Coalition, which is a group of stakeholders that are meeting on a regular basis to kind of look at the FIDI Seaport project, so that a huge coastal protection project that's planned potentially outward into the East River. And the reason that we've convened that coalition is because we want to ensure that there's robust community engagement leading up to the design of this project. We want to make sure that those who live in that community, those who use that waterfront, have a say in it, and that this project is being designed thoughtfully. So, so those are some of the other initiatives that we support. So. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions you guys might have.
Great. If anybody has a question, as Will explained, to just raise your the virtual hand, to get into your press the right button. This was great. Thank you. I have so many questions and comments and.
Same here. I have many. But we will let all of you, our guests, go first. If you have any questions about, the wonderful presentation that Tommy just did, if you have any questions at all about how it's going to be implemented, where, what the location would be, maybe like, one question I have is about curbside, composting that we were just told about. Where would that be? If you have any of those logistical questions too, please, Tommy is the one. Please, she's available and so wonderful that she's here and she can answer.
Anybody raising their hand?
Yeah, we have Heather Ahmad. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
Heather, look for a prompt on your screen to unmute.
Thank you. I had just a general question. Is there well, I'd like to know what New York City and what the Manhattan Borough President's Office, what are their assumptions about climate change? What do they base all this on? How are they looking at ahead 30 years at temperature changes within the next 30 years, water level changes in the next 30 years, or is it 50 years? Is it 100 years? Is there, some document somewhere that has all this stuff that all of the agencies use and refer to and make decisions based on?
Yeah, that's a great question. New York City is really fortunate that we have an expert panel called the New York City Panel on Climate Change, NPCC. It's modeled after the kind of federal IPCC. Or I guess it's not federal, but the one the federal government participates in, International Panel on Climate Change. And they develop projections for New York City. They have both short-term projections and long-term projections. So I'm not exactly sure. I don't think it's the 10-year, but they do definitely have 30, 50, and 100-year projections. The farther you get out, the less there's a greater degree of uncertainty. as to the projections. And there's a range, right? They have different percentiles. And so that's really kind of the leading authority that the city looks to in determining its climate policies and where they, what projections we're relying on. The other thing that I will say is that they do look at sea level rise. They look at sea level rise projections, precipitation projections, and heat projections. So those are kind of the three. Again, getting back to those vulnerabilities that we talked about earlier, and those are the categories.
Mm-hmm. And so there's it's on the, if I do some Googling on the New York City panel on climate change,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be able to dig something up. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I will, we can go to the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice website, but let me see if I can if I put something in a link in the chat, I think it's only direct message, right?
No, you can put it to me and I'll put it to everybody else.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Tommy.
Mm-hmm.
So Heather, that was a great question. And I think next I see Boaz Galil. He has his hand up.
Hello, can you hear me and can you see me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, thank you very much. Good to see you too. First of all, I want to thank and recognize the co-chairs of setting up such an important meeting. I learned a lot. Thank you very much for the presentation. Please continue to bring smart guests like the guests that we have today. Thank you very much. I learned a lot. So now to my questions. And my first question, I came to New York in 2012, just on time for Superstorm Sandy. I haven't been in Manhattan. I've been in Long Island, and I didn't have electricity for over a week. The entire neighborhood ran out of food, gas, and we're not talking about, the desert. We're talking about a place, I don't know, an hour drive from Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was really disaster, really disaster. If you go now back to talk with people from Long Island that have been during that, they remember that. I mean, of course, for people that have property over there, years after, they are still chasing for the insurance and so on, but it was really disaster. Now, years later, somehow, I don't know, the village, the Long Island, I don't know, some official reached out to me and asked me, there was some survey, what do I think about the entire Superstorm Sandy and so on. My only feedback, the most important, is that, we don't really know. I mean, we can prepare to what we think, but usually it's very hard to prepare for such a disaster. And my only thing that I wanted that Long Island, I don't know who is responsible, is next time, in next disaster, that they will click on the panic button or red alert button sooner than later. What do I mean by that? After 7 days, the National Guard came and gave us a combat food. We ran out of food an hour from Manhattan. So what I'm asking, we can continue the discussion, what can we do, and that, and this, e-bike, the e-bike will help us against global, no problem. I support everything that you guys said, but my only ask is that the city will recognize that in case of a disaster, they will deploy, I don't know, National Guard, call the president, bring the bring the necessary help that the city needs. Don't wait days, because specific in disaster, every minute counts. That's my first ask. My second question is more about funds. How much fund the city has for all those projects? Can you give us some numbers? I'm really interested. How much does it cost? All of those stuff. And the third thing is, I was a little bit disappointed that you didn't mention, or maybe you mentioned and I didn't notice, public transportation. I really think that public transportation, specifically here in the city, I mean, that we already have the infrastructure. We just need to improve it. With all due respect to the micro transportation, e-bikes, and I think that I saw that recently there was a daily new record of 4 million people driving the MTA, the subway or something like that. But I think that many people, specifically what I hear from Community Board Day, are afraid of using the subway in certain hours, are disappointed about the service, SLA of the buses and so on. I think that we need to plug some money or improve the service of the public transportation here in the city, and I think it will help a lot because it will reduce the cars from the city and so on. Other than that, Tommy, thank you very much. I learned a lot. Please come again with more information, and thank you. That's it for my end. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. I think with in terms of the Superstorm Sandy, completely agree with you. I think the city's emergency response could have been better. I think they also have learned a lot of lessons from that, and New York City emergency management specifically. I think we are a little bit better prepared than we were in 2012 when Hurricane Sandy hit. I think they also, have been working on all of these coastal protection projects to hopefully ensure that we don't experience the same level of catastrophe that we did during Hurricane Sandy. The Con Ed, so in Manhattan, the Con Ed facility that lost power or that contributed to the loss of power throughout lower Manhattan has now undergone extensive storm hardening upgrades. And that's also in the same vicinity where the city is implementing the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. It's been slow going, but there are efforts to help kind of fortify our coastline here, which again would if we do see another Sandy, once those projects are up and running, would hopefully reduce those impacts. In terms of the MTA and transportation issues, completely agree. We want to see more New Yorkers taking public transportation, and any policies that we can encourage that, we certainly are supportive of. So for example, the borough president also didn't make it to this deck, but the borough president is also in support of kind of all-door boarding for the buses, which would increase, I think studies have shown would increase the time spent stopping by 30%. I think that will, and especially like having Omni working on all the buses so that people can pay again, enter on all doors, even the, not the SBSs, not just the SBSs. And the other thing too, a bit more controversial, also didn't make it to this deck. I mean, the borough president has so many policies on this, I couldn't fit everything in there, but he's also a fan of or in support of congestion pricing, which would contribute to more funding to the MTA and to public transportation. So understood that might be a controversial topic for some on this call, but the borough president has come out as a vocal supporter of congestion pricing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Boaz, for these amazing questions, and thank you, Tommy, for giving such detailed answers. Do we have anyone else who has any other comments? Because Tommy's with us. You can share what you feel. Being a neighborhood, being a resident of Upper East Side. If you have anything, I think I have another one, Faiza Moji. Please go ahead, Faiza.
It's Marty's listening.
Hi there. Hi, Sahar. Hi. And thank you, Tommy, for your presentation. Appreciate it. I don't know if you talked about this, but I would love to understand what kind of zoning regulations, what kind of changes are happening, especially around the perimeter of the city. You talked a little bit about, like bike lanes, etc. I think, I have a bunch of friends who live in Carlina Rivera's district, and I think you probably know what I'm going to talk about. the East River Park project. And I guess my concern is, like a lot of money was spent on that project, and I see a lot of construction, like there's that island, little island, I think it's called, on the west side near Chelsea Piers. I guess my question is, given the fact that we are an island, and given the fact that sea levels will rise and, large parts of Battery City Park, et cetera, will be flooded, is there no kind of moratorium or, I guess, guidelines or rules for planning buildings around, the perimeter of the island? I know that one of the reasons for building East River Park the way they did was because they wanted to elevate it and fortify it, I think, for future generations. But it was a 48-acre park, and there were tons of trees there, and those were cut down. And I went there the other day, and it's not pretty, it's not green. And so I guess my question is, we know what's going to happen. We don't want to be another Miami. So my question is, what are we doing in terms of green and eco solutions, and incorporating those into zoning to better, I guess, serve future generations for the city? I'd love to hear more about that. And I know you discussed some of it, but I would love more detail on zoning and regulations, and basically making the surrounding areas green, so that they can better absorb water next time there's a flood, because it will happen. Thank you.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And again, that's why, we're really supportive of a Million More Trees initiative. We think that trees do help absorb storm or rainwater. They are an important green infrastructure tool. So that's one of the reasons this is such a big push for us, and such a big, our kind of one of our staple priorities in terms of our climate policy. I will say that for zoning, the Department of City Planning did recently update some zoning provisions as it relates to coastal flood, but it's not that green. I think they are most of the changes were about how buildings can essentially become taller, and how that won't hurt them from if their height limitations, so they can elevate out of the floodplain. That was like kind of the really big push. The building code also really has strong regulations on construction in the flood zone, but the building code only gets triggered when you are constructing something new or substantially renovating existing buildings. So there's no kind of affirmative requirement that buildings, either through zoning or the building code, do something now. So if you think about Local Law 97, that's actually requiring that buildings go and make existing buildings go and make upgrades, even if they're not doing any other work. And that's really a unique factor in Local Law 97. But with flood protection, that's not the case. You only have to make upgrades to buildings when you're doing work or building something new from scratch. So once you are doing once you trigger Appendix G, once you trigger those zoning requirements, they are really strict. You have to be elevated out of the flood zone. You can't have residential spaces below the floodplains and expected flood areas. But I think we do have not a long way to go, but I think the city could do better in implementing green infrastructure practices. DEP has a Greenbelt program, but those, the problem with Manhattan and implementing, I think, a lot of green infrastructure in Manhattan and relying on that is that there just isn't a lot of green space to begin with. We are incredibly densely populated right up to our coastline in most instances. The East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, part of the reason that this is the biggest project the city's been able to implement in Manhattan, and it's the farthest along, is because there was this green area that they could build coastal defense on. So I know that there's a lot of controversy over the trees that had to be taken down, but the plans do call for replacing those trees, and they did. The Parks Department, I think, relocated trees to this extent that they could. But the fact is that there is real estate there to build these coastal protection projects, and that's what we're seeing in the Fidei Seaport neighborhood, is that there isn't like geographic space to build something. And so they're having to go out into the water. It's in water, it's a proposed in-water barrier. And that is, is incredibly expensive. And also, I think the city will face and has been facing tremendous pushback from our federal and state regulators. Once you start touching water lines, then you get DEC coming in and the Army Corps of Engineers issuing permits, and that's a much more challenging environment to construct in. So I think those are some of the challenges, particularly in Manhattan, that the city faces. And then in terms of like just natural infrastructure to, we don't have mangroves or, oysters always kind of get brought up, and living shorelines and living breakwaters. Great ideas. We, I think, are again struggling to find the real estate to implement projects like that. And I also think that the reliability or maintenance issues, the city knows how to maintain a concrete wall. It's a lot harder to maintain oyster beds or other types of infrastructure. So I think that's another reason that the city tends to lean more towards the gray infrastructure than the green.
Thank you.
Not to say that those are good reasons. I mean, that those are, should overpower any other reasons. We're definitely supporting green infrastructure where it's feasible, but recognizing that in some circumstances our options are limited.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Faiza, and thank you, Tommy.
Are there other questions? Other hands? No? Can I go?
Yes, please, Barbara. There are.
Okay. I have a slew. First of all, I just want to say thank you for these initiatives. And what surprises me is so many of them are not the same as others we've heard, which gives me some hope because there's so many initiatives that can be taken. So I'm going to go over a couple that you have said. First of all, the idea of making one agency, it's not limited just to this. This has been something that has been a pet peeve of mine and many people, that so many projects don't get done because there are so many agencies that are involved. So I would love to support it. If it means a resolution or whatever you think, Tommy, I would love to support the initiative to make one agency to work with it, which I think was your first point, if I'm not mistaken.
Second, yeah.
Second?
Climate ready waterfront, I think, is what you're referring to.
And I feel that way generally. A question, you talked about DOB taking over. Mm-hmm. I'm surprised. Do you feel they have the ability to do so?
Yes, I think more so than SBS, certainly. I was before.
Tell me what it.
Department of Small Business Services.
Oh, the small business.
Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of getting a little wonky here, but right now, under the charter, the Department of Small Business Services actually does have jurisdiction over the city's waterfront assets and waterfront.
It doesn't sound very
so yeah, and so if you want a waterfront permit, you have to go to SBS to get that permit, and they have only a couple of people who work on this, and
it's so rather than parks or some other agency, the Department of Building would be the right one. Okay,
mm-hmm.
It was a surprise.
That's our opinion, because you're probably going to the Department of Buildings for any number of things. The Department of Buildings is, I think, best situated to develop a waterfront code. And frankly, they're already working on it, which is, good, but it got dropped as a priority. So my previous life, before I was in the climate offices of the mayor, I also worked for the Department of Buildings. And they, back in 2015, had started this waterfront code, slow moving, and they didn't want to take on the permitting until they got the code in place, but then COVID hit and they completely dropped it. I think I've heard that they're picking it back up again, but we think the importance of legislation here is to give DOB a timeline and say you need to, have this code in place by a date certain, and then also move that permitting over to them.
So when do you want? Can
I go through the questions and then we'll go through what we should do in terms of resolution or something? Do you mind? Because I think we'll have several that we can talk about.
Sure, sure.
I'm going to make a comment about e-bikes. From what I hear, the best thing about e-bikes is it makes regular bikes less scary and emotional. I understand the pluses of e-bikes. I understand they go faster. There are more people using it rather than cars and so on. I feel sometimes we have the cart before the horse, and in this case, we don't have the places for it. And I think this is another one, along with congestion pricing, that is a very emotional topic, because many of us cross the street with fear that one of the e-bikes will come and run us over. So I'm wondering, and then I'm going to say a second thing about e-bikes. I'm very proud to say it's our environment committee that passed a resolution a while ago to say that the batteries are very dangerous and that we need to do something. And finally, I'm starting to hear back and forth. I understand that we want to be fair to people that have been treated unfair, but it seems to me we don't want anybody's building blown up, anybody killed. Why aren't we just saying that these batteries are bad and we need to replace them?
Yes, I don't disagree with you at all. I think, safety is incredibly important, and the safety of these kind of somewhat nascent. What was that? We're
talking about death. I mean, people have died from this.
No, absolutely. And I have a toddler, and he's 4 now. He was back there a little while ago, but I have those same fears, right? Like even just walking on the sidewalk, not even crossing the street, walking on the sidewalk, I live in fear that he's going to get hit by an e-bike that's just kind of gone off course to make its delivery, or whatever. And so completely agree. There needs to be better enforcement of these e-bikes that are not following rules. And I think this also gets to the 9A proposal too, where we're proposing to separate bikes and e-bikes from pedestrian pathways, to the extent that we have real estate to do that, even if that means cutting into car lanes. I think we need to make sure that pedestrians and e-bikes are not occupying the same space in our streetscape. So that's kind of the borough president's approach. I think in terms of the safety issue with the batteries, again, agree that the safety issues need to be addressed. This is something that we are bringing up. Our concerns to FDNY and regulating them and how they're charged. But to the extent that they're getting cars off the street, to the extent that they are electric vehicles and they're not, contributing to greenhouse gas emissions, we think that there are definitely benefits. But this is a nascent technology. It needs to be, it does need to be regulated. It needs to, it can't come at the expense of public safety.
Right.
In many parts of public safety. Congestion pricing, I don't even want to mention, because if you mention it at one of our meetings, this is another one of a hot topic of back and forth. So we won't even bring that up.
Barbara, I'm going to just interrupt, sorry, because I think Marco is here.
Okay.
Let's take his question and then we can come back to yours, and I have a few too.
Right.
Would that work? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Ms. Tommy, thank you so much. But I think to make easier and you understand where I'm coming from, yes, I'm an architect and also a FEMA certified professional. So I'm an expert in resilience. I'm going to say that for our community, that's basically we have to discuss. I don't want to go in another boroughs or another neighborhoods, but we have a problem of inland flooding, specifically in East 90th Street. Do you have any plan for that?
And the FDR Drive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And 79 and the East River Drive on 60th Street. This is 3 point. Oh, finally, this is flooding cost. I'm talking about the inland flooding. So there are two different issues, you understand. That's the inland. The outland, basically we have NYCHA on 90s, 79th Street and 60th Street. Especially, I'm interested to know about NYCHA because this is a very low-income families. And how do you expect to do something about them?
It's protecting them from inland flooding. Yeah. I mean, this is something that, the Department of Environmental Protection is grappling with. They're unfortunately, our sewers and our drainage systems were built 100 years ago, especially in neighborhoods as old as the Upper East Side. It's unfortunate, but they were built to be able to withstand a certain amount of rainfall per hour. And with climate change, we're just seeing that amount of rainfall per hour increase drastically. So, I do think the DEP is working on it, but as far as I can tell, it's a bit of a whack-a-mole right now that, they have plans to address some flooding in some areas, but my suggestion is actually that you, whenever you see inland flooding, you're calling 311 because, and you're reporting it to 311, you're reporting it to DEP. You can flag it for our office as well. We can help try and get the attention, but because this is an issue in so many areas of the city, the squeaky wheels are the ones that are going to get addressed first. Sometimes it's a combination of Department of Transportation and DEP. So if there happens to be, a DOT project going in there, but they don't, a curb cut or something, and they don't realize that there's flooding there, they're not going to do anything to address it. So my suggestion, and I think the best way to work with these specific issues that you flagged is making sure that these are on the city's radar, and you are calling kind of every single time you see it, so they understand the frequency of the flooding.
Okay, let me ask one very important question. The borough president is part of the Euler process.
Yes.
So they are coming most of the project that, especially with discretionary actions, to your office. Why do you don't request that those buildings must be net zero? No passive housing, net zero. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea. We're currently working on kind of a plan for incorporating some kind of climate resilience and climate sustainability guidelines into our ULURP approvals. So it's an excellent suggestion. It's one we're taking under consideration.
Thank you.
We've only been in the administration. We've only been in this office now for about a year and a half. So we put out our Housing Manhattanites plan, and I think that's, there's so many issues that we want to address. The first year, a lot of focus, and most recently with the starting in January, our Housing Manhattanites plan, and kind of getting housing approved and thinking about housing very broadly. But this next year going forward, we are looking for ways that we can push and incorporate resilience and sustainability measures into our policies and approvals, including ULURP. So thank you for that suggestion.
I'm going to end it with that, saying that thank you for the answer. Please pay strong attention because it's not fair. They receive floor air and height of the buildings excessively. And that is fine in some cases. But in any event, the point is, at least they should give something to the community. And you know very well, the more 70% of the emissions are coming from buildings. I understand. I think you know very well. So therefore, if those buildings at least do not impact negatively in the quality of air, because those buildings are actually, I'm seeing that they put a glass, which is basically, it's terrible what they're doing. But the point is I think the borough president has an opportunity to make a statement over there. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to ask a couple of questions since I
Okay, then I'll go back to it.
Okay. So yeah, I just, Barbara, or do you want to go ahead first and then I can ask?
If you want to, and then I'll continue. Maybe we'll have some duplicates, but I do have.
Okay. So the first, and I was listening to your amazing presentation. I was actually constantly thinking, how do we really on the ground implement it? So my first one was about the curbside composting. I wanted to know, where are the locations? Where is that happening? Where are you going to place them? so that we can really, our neighborhood can really avail it, and the residents use it, and we do make a difference. So where would that be? So, and then I'll ask you my other questions. So I'll go one by one.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that the Adams administration has said that they are only going to roll out curbside composting to Manhattan into 2024 is because they haven't actually figured out the logistics quite yet.
I think, right? 2025.
Or 20, maybe it's 2025. You're right.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons is because there are logistical problems. So I see here Manhattan, October 7th, 2024 is what was in there.
Oh, 2024.
Okay, good.
But end of 2024. So almost 25.
Right.
But the problem, I think, is finding actual physical space for them. I think my understanding is, don't hold me to this, you should definitely check with sanitation, but my understanding is that they're going to be rolling out the brown bins to every building, and the expectation is that those brown bins will live kind of somewhere close to or adjacent to where the buildings keep their existing trash. I think right now the brown bins are picked up on the same cycle as the recycling. So it's not an everyday pickup. It's once a week, or maybe twice a week pickup. And the space would be the kind of the same space where the buildings keep their existing trash.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think that should make a big difference to the environment. My other question was for your waterfront agency that we heard about. I was just wondering about the accountability. How does that come into play for the waterfront agency? What are since it's starting anew, what are the kind of what has been placed put in place for that, so that it goes at the right in the right manner from the start?
I mean, that's a great question. I will also let this group know this isn't the borough president's proposal, but the administration in its Plan NYC, its new sustainability plan that was released last week, they announced an intent to consolidate waterfront coastal protection projects under the Department of Environmental Protection, and to create a new bureau in the Department of Environmental Protection. It seems to kind of somewhat align actually fairly closely with our proposal, except instead of creating a new agency, it would be a bureau within DEP. I think there are ways that makes sense insofar as DEP deals with water. They're already kind of involved with a lot of the coastal protection projects from a drainage perspective. So they have the workforce to be able to operate and maintain infrastructure, which right now a lot of this is being organized at the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice. They're the ones who kind of coordinating the different agencies involved in these projects, and that's problematic because the Mayor's Office doesn't have a capital budget. It also doesn't have staff that are qualified to do any kind of operation and maintenance of these things. So we really need a capital agency to do that, which is why the borough president thinks it's important to have a standalone agency that does that. The administration's approach seems to be that they want to do that under a bureau at DEP. But so there is some alignment. I think in terms of accountability, we would need, the borough president is proposing legislation to effectuate this, to actually make it happen. And we're working very closely with council on that. We hope to see something in the next month or so along those lines. And I think, but in the way that we envision this agency as increasing accountability is, again, having an agency that you can actually turn to for projects like the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project as an example, and say, I'm not happy about this, or we need more community outreach. We need, to understand where the funding is going and why the money is being sent in this way. So we do think that having a single agency as a point of contact for these really big coastal protection projects will be very important. And also bringing in in-house expertise and having that housed somewhere. Right now, again, you have agencies with waterfront assets that seem to not know how to manage them very well. The example I tend to turn to a bit, as it's close to home, is the East River Esplanade, and how the Parks Department can't seem to keep that from falling into the river periodically. So, chunks of it. So if there were some in-house city expertise that they could go to and say, what's going on here? How do we maintain this? Because I don't think it's just strictly an issue of money. I do think that it is, frankly, some expertise issue that the city is dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Okay, sounds good. I just heard one more, and this is the last one that I have, that I had heard about the cameras in relation to your e-commerce that you had mentioned. That there would be the idea is that to have cameras, it's not kind of in different areas. I was wondering if there was a budget, I know this is a great idea, but has a budget been assigned to it to make it a reality? Because that would actually be great, because there's so many rules and regulations that are kind of not being followed, and the cameras would catch it. And I think with we have to have them for loading, unloading, and all of those different elements. So as well. So is there a budget for it?
As far as I know, there's not a separate budget for these type of cameras. That's why, again, we think we're pushing the administration to include that in their budget. We think it's an important aspect of addressing the e-commerce issue. And we also think that there might be some ability to use. So there's currently, I think, some cameras in place for the bus lanes. So cars that violate the bus lanes prohibitions on cars, that maybe they could use that also to capture some of the double, triple parking.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Are you done? Okay, great. I just would like one more comment on composting, and or as my feeling about it. A while ago, we were promised that we would all get a composting bin if our buildings wanted it, and then it just didn't happen. I just think that it's so important when I think of the garbage I throw out that I would be able to compost. If I didn't, I think we would have less these garbage bags, less rats, less of the ugly stuff that's on the sidewalk. So I wish we can press it. I would urge that we press that we get it before a year and change from a year and a half from now.
Yeah, and that's best case scenario, I think. I know you.
I know you agree with me.
Yes, absolutely. And,
right.
I think 2025 is probably a more realistic time frame. And I think, the other component to this that we're urging the administration is that if they can't, logistically roll this out any sooner, we would like to see more smart bins located in neighborhoods around Manhattan. Smart bins are those kind of bins that you see on the street that kind of open and close and that are for compost, either brown. So having more of those deployed around Manhattan while we wait for our curbside composting is something else that we're pushing for. And even that has been delayed. So yeah.
So I won't say more than that. The ferry, I think one of the brightest lights that we've had was the inclusion of the ferry rides. I do worry because I know we hear that they're losing money. I think the more we could use our waterfront for transportation, for the joy of everybody, people going to work and using it, you agree, I guess, with it. I hope that that's another way of support that I think is environmentally friendly. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. And the borough president is in support of the city's ferry system. He's actually trying, pushing the administration to consider including ferry service on the west side as well. That's a whole, not that interesting to this group here, but that's a whole swath of Manhattan that hasn't been able to see the joys of a ferry ride brought to their neighborhood. So that is a big push for us in expanding it and keeping it affordable as well.
Right. And then just a push for the East River Esplanade that is not only fun, but I think an environmental issue that we need to, and I totally agree. We're hard on it, as you know, is our Tricia Shimomura that's now in the borough president's office, is her issue also, and I think we do need it. The local law 97, our committee heard from the city, although we heard you speak about it, and I think it's very important. It is amazing how many people really do know about it. Just make it electric, or even the bare bones. I think we need more education with it. Is it practical? Is it really going to happen, do you think? I think with new buildings, it's very practical and happening. But do you think that pre-war buildings, my building, that's a 1970s building, is it going to happen, do you think? And how is it going to be feasible so that people like me won't have a $20,000 assessment to have it done?
Yeah. I mean, I think with local law 97 in particular, there is a bit of a lead up to it. So right now, under DOB's currently promulgated rules, there's an expectation that buildings of a certain size will achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, right? So even though the law begins its implementation cycle next year, it does that first year, the first compliance period, which is 2024 to 2029, only a very small number of buildings, I think it's 10%, are expected to see fines. And even then, it's only a smaller fraction that are expected to see substantial fines. And so there, it's kind of the hope is that you'll be moving the needle, you'll be doing the buildings will be implementing energy efficiency projects and envelope upgrades so that they're able to meet their targets in that first tranche. And then in 2030 to 2034, it gets a little stricter. So again, giving you another 5 years to kind of make some improvements. And then with the hope that, in this next 25 years, buildings will have hit a point in their maintenance cycle where they are able to replace boilers, they're able to align it with their financing needs, and maybe spread the cost out over an extended period of time. The city also has the PACE program, which I think is not actually a low cost loan necessarily, but there are funding options that the city put in place with the PACE program. And then there are actually a lot of other financial incentives offered by the federal government and New York State that buildings can pursue. So I'm not sure who came to speak to you from the city, but hopefully they really plugged the New York City Accelerator and having buildings reach out to them. That is a technical resource for buildings, and it's not just about connecting you with contractors. They also are looking for, what kind of funding opportunities are available to buildings for these type of upgrades. So, with the Inflation Reduction Act, the federal government is putting a lot of money towards climate efforts. And so there's rebates out there. There's all kinds of incentives. So the hope is that, and then again, with the 25-year full implementation timeframe, and this is like, the local law 97 was passed in 2019. So buildings have been on notice about this by the time that you expect carbon neutrality for quite a while. And I think it wasn't really until the DOB promulgated its rules this year that people started to take it seriously. So I'm glad to hear that a lot of people are aware of it. It's on a lot of people's minds, but I think buildings were putting off making necessary changes until DOB promulgated its rules, thinking that, oh, we're going to get out of this. But that doesn't seem to be the case. The borough president attended on last week, attended a rally on ensuring, a rally to ensure local law 97 full implementation. So as many building owners are out there who are opposed to this law, there are a lot of environmental groups who are very much in support of it. And so I think it would be tough for the Adams administration to really decide not to fine people or not to pursue it and just kind of let it die by the wayside. I think there's a lot of support.
Good.
We definitely need this because it is so important. We can't keep delaying it because this is, if we don't do it right now, 5 years down the road, we have to. So it's not something that you can just get away from. The cost factor is there, but We have to switch and make those adjustments.
Yeah, well, some thought is that maybe 5 years down the road, there would be some easier way of doing a couple of things, but I don't know. That was another whole topic. I'm going to make two other very quick ones. First, a question. We hear that the bigger buildings, our community board has been pushing for some height limits. What effect do you think that higher buildings, taller buildings have on the negative effect of the environment, more of the heat islands and so on? What do you think? What studies have been done, and what is your feeling about it?
I see Marco's hands up. I don't know if he has thoughts. Yeah. I am not an engineer. I haven't actually seen studies on this, but my uninformed opinion is, and again, not the borough president's, but I think he's in the same boat here, is that density is generally better from an energy efficiency perspective than from an environmental perspective. So the extent to which we are putting more people in, taller buildings, I think that, from a climate perspective is not a bad idea.
It's not a bad idea?
It's not a bad idea. I think you can gain efficiencies and also, affordability. People need places to live.
Everything has a two-edged sword. Now I'm going to ask a general question that I know Sahar will agree with me.
Can I just ask if, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to see if Marco, was your comment or question related to that, the density one?
Did we hear? I'm sorry, Marco.
Yeah, let's take
No, it's okay, Barbara. Thank you so much. And thank you, Tommy. The issue is next. The relation, somebody come into the community board and claim something is not true. It is true when the buildings are glass. Yes, definitely. But if the building actually just only comply with the energy code, which is now is mandatory. So the issue basically is not the height. The height has nothing to do with the loss of energy. So there is no a good argument if they want to say, let me see, 210, no more than that. No, that's not a good argument, because it depends how the fenestration or the cladding of the building is. It depends of how to reduce the loads. The major point is to reduce the loads in those buildings. If you reduce successfully 80%, you don't have even to change the boiler. Why? Because if you have a bill of $100 a month, imagine that just only doing the right thing, you pay a bill of $20. So I think it's great. So it's a great benefit, but it's very expensive at the beginning. Yes. And the only thing I would like to hear maybe that you can force is there are some buildings in construction that they're supposed to be in compliance with the energy code. And those buildings, they are not. Because the Department of Building, at the time when they approve, didn't have the team, the expertise. Now they have, and they make a nightmare for all of us. So they are very strict now. So that's the only thing I would like to add. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very interesting. We hear different things about it. I'm going to ask something, I think, for Sahar also. Would a resolution help support some of the initiatives that the borough president is putting through?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've already passed a resolution for the 1 million more trees, which we're very, very appreciative of. I think I
would like the one agency.
The one agency, yes, absolutely. So that's the climate ready and well-managed waterfront. We, again, are working with council on this right now. I think once we have kind of fleshed out the details a little bit more, we will come to you with the request. But I think right now there's a bit of some negotiations happening in terms of what the legislation will look like. So I think it's hard to say what exactly a helpful resolution would look like until we're kind of finalizing those details.
In terms of the one agency? Okay. Which ones would you like us to press that we can now ask for a vote today?
Oh, a vote today. Wow.
Yeah. And then we bring it, this is not final, then we bring it to the full board.
Okay. That is a good question. I think if there was one that's probably closest to ready would be the climate ready and well-managed waterfront, and in support of that. So let me, so if you wanted to vote today, and then, but I don't have, text to share at this moment, but I can take it back to our policy team and get something for you on that.
I don't know if we can, I don't know if Will's still on, if we could take a vote on something that isn't more specific.
I mean, you can vote on anything you want to. I think your fellow members may push back on something that isn't fleshed out yet.
Can you go back on the climate ready, that one that you said is possibly something? Can you just a sentence or two review what that was?
Sorry, the climate ready, it's the waterfront agency. So the climate ready and well-managed waterfront, let me see. Yeah, I think, so the two components to it are that give a new jurisdiction over the city's waterfront assets to a new agency of the waterfront, and to also move waterfront permitting to Department of Buildings. Those are the two components of it right now.
I'll point out, if this is helpful, Barbara, as you're deciding, the community board has passed multiple resolutions in support of congestion pricing over the years. But that was prior to any specific specific legislation policy. So if you're supporting a broad change, congestion pricing was supported, you don't need to necessarily say you're supportive of a certain bill or a certain, type of agent, certain named agency or whatever. I think it's probably
quite specific. I think this is
that's how I would pitch it. But
maybe a little bit general, and we can work on that. And once maybe Tommy in the future has something more specific, we can come up with that further resolution. I think that would probably be the best, so that we can, because we strongly feel about this. It feels like a great idea, and if we can make it happen, we can take a vote. I think Marco has something to say on this particular point.
Yes, thank you so much. The only thing is, I know very well, I'm against of that, and every vote I go against that. But I think when we can pass,
I'm sorry, against what?
Against congestion pricing.
We're not going back to this. We're talking about the other. We know.
Right. Go ahead, Marco.
The issue is, what I'm recommending is, in this case, it will be easier to pass if we support the 1,000 trees, because there's going to
need to evidently. Yeah, we evidently
because we pass with that regulation, we can reduce the heat island effect in some way, and we have managed the storm rain too. So we can do that, and that's my suggestion, because it's easier, simple, and I think you can have a very positive reaction in the full board. That is my comment. Thank you.
We already passed the 1,000,000 trees, so I don't.
Oh, you passed already?
Okay. That's right. That's what Tommy is saying. We already passed that. The agency one, I think, is very important, because there's such duplication in every aspect, whether we're talking about the cannabis, where there's 1,000,000 agencies, or whatever we're talking about. There's so many agencies that we tend not to get done, and this is so important. I don't know if people agree, or Tommy, if you could help us with that.
Yeah, I'm texting the policy director now and asking him to weigh in here on what he thinks. Chris Carroll, I don't know if any of you have met him, but I've texted him to see if he can get back to me on what would be helpful in a resolution on the waterfront agency.
Thanks, Will, for sharing that. And Marco, it was a great idea, but as Will has just shared in the chat, that there was a resolution that we all in the past, but great idea, because that is so needed, and that's why the work is happening on this. So So we
And-
can have a
And
generic.
another thing too might be a resolution in support of the 1% for parks. I don't know, for parks budget.
Oh,
kind of
that
like a
would be
sub-
great
Yeah.
one. That
That's
would
like
be
a
with parks
subcomponent.
also.
That's like a subcomponent of the Million More Trees initiative.
I think it's great.
Well,
I agree
Will,
with
would
that.
that be a
Great idea.
problem
Let's
because
do
of
that.
parks, or can we do that?
Well, so
can-
we did put something like that into our district needs statement and budget list of budget priorities. So I think you putting a resolution together is just something that is already exists in a document that we've all voted on, or the board has all voted on in recent months. So
Those district
So-
needs tend to go in various places. This is going against the mayor's budget. Am I right? The mayor's budget was cutting parks, I think. Am I right, Tommy?
I'm not sure if they were.
I'm not sure.
Um,
I think they might have kind of maintained an existing funding level, but it's I think like $600 million short of the 1% for parks.
And we can do it in terms of the environment, and that would be for the trees alone, or green space generally.
For green space generally. I think another really interesting one or suggestion is NYCHA released a report. I want to say, let me see if I can Google it really fast. On their tree canopy and their urban forest. And that report recommended that there be a maintenance program established for NYCHA. And again, the NYCHA is second only to the Parks Department in terms of the number of trees that are under its jurisdiction in the city. And they do provide very important green space to neighborhoods that are very high on the heat vulnerability index. So, one idea too might be that you can do a resolution in support of funding tree maintenance at NYCHA.
Can it be the same resolution with two
Sure.
parts to it?
Does that work?
Does anybody want to make that resolution?
Yeah, I would like to put a resolution as presented. Is anybody can
Very
second
much.
now?
We'll
I
work
think
on the
it's between
whereases
the
and
three.
all that. Right. That's great. I don't know how many community board people.
There are only three.
Yeah.
No, there's four.
Two?
Yeah.
Oh,
There's four. Well, Wilma is
Oh,
here as
Wilma.
well.
Wilma,
Oh,
okay.
I gave a second on that.
Okay. Is there anybody voting no, not for cause or abstaining? Great. We have a resolution. And can we, I hate to keep pressing this point, but Tommy, do you think that it's worthwhile and will to have a general resolution about combining the agencies to make a more efficient decisions about waterfront?
Okay, I also just heard back from the policy director, Chris Carroll,
Okay.
and he said that it would be very helpful if there was a resolution in support of a waterfront agency idea. And so if you wanted to do it more general as opposed to an independent agency, and you wanted to maybe align it more or have it be a little bit broader, you could say that you believe that waterfront jurisdiction and asset management should be under one agency as opposed to a new agency.
It's really what you said at the very beginning, first, second, whatever it was, issue that you brought up.
Okay. I'm not going to argue against myself. So if you're willing to support that, all the better.
Okay, so I made the resolution. Marco? you gonna
Second.
say? Okay. All for, against? Right. We'll have these two resolutions that I think are so important.
Thank
Um,
you.
Thank
We
you
may
so
be
much.
calling you for more details, writing.
Yeah, of course,
Okay, that would be great.
of course.
Thank you. This
With
was,
that-
Thank you.
I just want to thank you. And again, I didn't feel there was duplication. In terms of congestion pricing, I'm just going to ask this. You didn't really say, I know you eventually said Mark is for congestion pricing, but it was more doing things that would limit the ability for cars to do it. Marco, you would vote against that, I assume, and I think we better stay away from that, right?
So I think, yeah, we have great resolutions tonight. So,
Yeah.
and it was wonderful. Thank you so much. I think with that, we will wrap up. I do want to acknowledge Courtney as well over here, who has
Courtney,
been with
thank you.
us from, Assembly Member Seawright's office. Thank you so much, Courtney, for being with us throughout. And Tommy, we can't thank you enough for such a great presentation and answering all our questions and, kind of coming up with these amazing resolutions, things that do
Yes.
matter to our
It
neighborhood.
It does. Can we ask if Courtney will have, I hate to put you on the spot, Courtney, but do you want to say anything about what Rebecca's doing, our great Assemblywoman is doing? Rebecca Seawright?
I don't have anything prepared, but thank you very much for having
Talk
me.
to her and she could come back to us.
Thank
Okay.
you so much. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to hear
Thank
the
you.
Borough President's
It's good to
report.
see you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for supporting our work with that. We want to say good night to all of you. Thank you very much. Barbara, do you want to end the meeting for us?
Thank you. And we love having these meetings and I feel so much more educated every time I have one.
Absolutely.
Great. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you
once
for
again.
giving us a forum.
Thank you.
Oh,
And thanks, Will. for
thank you
conducting it.
for coming. We
Yeah.
appreciate
We
it.
can't thank you enough, Will. Thanks. Take care,
Will.
everyone. Have a very good night.
We
Take
didn't
care.
say thank you to
Bye-bye.
Will. Will, you're a doll. Thank you.